Welcome to the AHCA NCAL National Quality Award Program's Examiner Training Series. Today's session will focus on feedback writing. I'm joined today by Gary Floss, a nationally recognized Baldrige authority, Baldrige examiner, and former Baldrige judge. Today we'll be considering the third session in the Examiner Training Series, specific to feedback writing. This session will include an embedded mini-webinar, which is provided by the Baldrige Performance Excellence Program. As many of you are aware, there is probably no more important task in the examiner job description than the production of meaningful, actionable, well-articulated feedback comments. Feedback provides applicants with information and perspective necessary to build better and better facilities that can then be reflected in better and better applications. Let's begin with a look at your manual. On page 14, you'll find a general perspective on feedback. As you know, feedback reports are sent to all non-disqualified applicants. As we discussed in the previous session on the review protocol, these reports are designed to integrate the most important comments for which there is consensus among team members. The reports are an integrated collection of non-prescriptive, actionable comments that are geared toward helping the applicant move specifically to the next higher scoring band for each item. Some general guidelines on comments. Be constructive. Use a positive tone. Most feedback reports are going to applicants who will not be receiving the award that year. That's fundamentally bad news. As examiners, we want to encourage applicants with actionable comments that help them continue their efforts. Write in complete sentences. This really helps our editors make sure that your meaning for each comment is retained accurately. Be non-prescriptive. Don't tell the applicants what to do. Many of our examiners are successful facility administrators themselves, and it can be tempting to suggest alternate approaches. Remember that your job is not that of a consultant. Comment only on areas contained in the criteria. The job of an examiner team is to determine the degree to which responses meet the demands of the criteria alone. Commenting on areas outside of the criteria, including writing style, spelling, and punctuation, is always inappropriate. Finally, focus on providing applicants with new, previously unrealized insights. Avoid simply repeating sections of the application back in feedback comments. Help applicants understand linkages and the so what of the implications behind your comments. At this point, we'll watch the embedded Baldrige mini-webinar on feedback. As you view the webinar, keep in mind that the content comes directly from the Baldrige Performance Excellence Program, and that some elements may not pertain directly to our program. Also, we've edited the webinar to remove some content that describes processes that are different than ours, in order to avoid confusion. Consequently, you'll notice that the webinar ends without much of a conclusion.
Welcome to Elements of a Well-Written Comment. This topic serves as an overview on writing a well-written, feedback-ready comment. While this e-learning module is designed with the new Baldrige examiner in mind, it can be an effective refresher for experienced examiners as well. Simply put, a well-written comment is valuable feedback for the applicant on what it does well and what it needs to improve. A well-written comment is precise, concise, and shows insights. Writing comments is actually as much an art as it is a science, and it takes time, practice, and feedback to hone and develop this skill. In this module, we'll be introduced to examples, guidelines, tools, and resources, and possible approach for developing a comment, but keep in mind that examiners approach this task in many different ways. Let's begin with the elements of a comment. A comment in a feedback report is the output from your analysis. Your analysis should balance the criteria, application, and the evaluation factors, ADLI and LETC, informed by your expertise and judgment to give the applicant some insight on its organizational maturity, what it needs to do to develop toward performance excellence. Your feedback comment should reflect the applicant's response to the criteria requirements in light of the Adley or LETC evaluation factors and the applicant's own distinctive attributes or situation as expressed in the organizational profile. Keeping the applicant, your customer, in mind, you want to make your comments actionable. To make your comments actionable for the applicant who will read them, write your comment to clearly tell the applicant an area of strength to continue or build on, or an area that needs more attention, an opportunity for improvement. To that end, a comment contains a concise opening statement of the main idea or essence of the comment, the relevance of this main idea to the applicant, why it's important, and some examples. Except for the opening sentence, these features don't reflect a prescribed order. They don't reflect a prescribed number of sentences either. Let's look at an example on the next slide. Let's take a look at an example demonstrating how these elements come together to provide a value-added comment for the applicant. First, there are the criteria item requirements. This example uses the requirements of item 1.1, which asks, how do your senior leaders lead? Specifically around communication processes. The next element is the applicant's response. The slide shows an applicant's response to 1.1b1. The next part of the equation is you, the examiner, who, after analyzing the applicant's responses against the criteria requirements and weighing and balancing the evaluation factors and the organization's key factors, drafts an actionable comment. Using this example from an application response to criteria item 1.b1, let's take a look at a possible comment. You'll be off to a good start in learning how to develop comments if you strive to do the following. Do keep the customer in mind. Ask yourself, can the applicant act based on my comment? Do address your comments to the basic, overall, or multiple criteria requirements that are most important to the applicant. And do write a unified, coherent, well-developed comment. Express the comment's single main point in a topic sentence followed by concisely written evidence. In addition, use the evaluation factors, ADLI or LETCI, to articulate the areas of strength or opportunities for improvement. Ensure relevancy by drawing linkages across items and to the applicant's organizational profile. Ensure that the comment does not contradict other comments in the same or other items. Now let's take a look at what your comments should not do. As you develop your comment, keep the following guidance in mind. Stay away from constructing an exhaustive list of every method described by the applicant that is related to your main point. Such lengthy lists rarely serve to provide clarity to the applicant, going beyond the requirements of the criteria or assert your personal opinions. Being prescriptive by using must, should, and would, or judgmental by using terms such as good, bad, or inadequate. Or commenting on the applicant's style of writing or data presentation. Writing comments takes practice. For now, focus on understanding the essential elements of a well-written comment. We encourage you to try your hand at developing comments for the assigned items in your pre-work packet.
Welcome back. Let's continue our look at good feedback by considering several feedback examples and talk about ways that they might be improved. But first, you'll recall ADLI and LETCI from the previous session on review protocol. We'll continue our use of these tools as we evaluate feedback. Additionally, let's look at a technique that will help you craft meaningful comments that are very specific to each application that you evaluate. A good comment includes language from three sources. Language from the scoring bands oriented to ADLI and LETCI, language from the award criteria, and language from the application itself. For the sake of clarity in our examples, we'll color code the scoring band language green, the criteria language gold, and the language drawn from the application black. A quick refresher on the language of the scoring guidelines might be helpful. For ADLI, remember that each scoring band has 4 statements, one each for approach, deployment, learning, and integration. As you will recall, these statements should accurately describe the respective A, D, L, or I characteristic of the item as scored within that range. Also, make sure to review the definitions for approach, deployment, learning, and integration in the glossary included in your manual before you begin writing feedback comments. Finally, recall the three parts of the criteria for each item: basic, overall, and multiple requirements. You will see these requirements specifically mentioned in the scoring guidelines. As you become more familiar with the power of ADLI and LETC used in conjunction with the scoring guidelines, you'll be able to confidently arrive at meaningful feedback comments and appropriate scores. Would you agree with that, Gary?
Absolutely. It's not unusual, too, that an applicant may, in their response, kind of cross over from basic to overall, even up to multiple as well. Even though that they may be intending to write only to overall, they may sprinkle in multiple requirement responses as well. So our job as examiners is to make sure that we kind of distinguish that, and we're giving them the proper credit in the scoring guidelines.
Okay, let's look at some examples. Here's an example from a criteria response to criteria 1.1. Leaders communicate the vision and values directly by presenting at new employee orientation and ensuring performance evaluations are complete. Leaders guide through the law, Leadership at Work, a series of structured meetings, see Table 1.1a, where strategies and plans are reviewed and barriers are sent to the CQI team for evaluation. Here's a strength comment that might have been written to that criteria response. Remember that green is the scoring guidelines language, gold is criteria language, and black is application language. Strength. The organization has a well-deployed, effective approach to guiding and sustaining the organization through its law, a series of meetings described in Table 1.1a, with topics and interactions that engage staff in organizational strategy to improve the patient experience. How do these language components each contribute to a meaningful comment? The green scoring guideline language provides part of the rationale for why the item was scored in a particular band. The gold criteria language and the black application language bring together a requirement of the criteria with a response from the application. And because this is a strength comment, the inference is that the application response meets the criteria demand. Let's take a look at an OFI comment. Although the applicant shows the beginning of a systematic approach to leading through participation in employee orientation and maintaining performance evaluations, it is not clear how many of the leaders participate, nor how often, which may impact the deployment and success of the practices. Some reaction to this comment, Gary?
Well, it's again not unusual that an organization may be just at the start of deploying a new approach, a new process that is not fully deployed. And so in this OFI comment, we're giving them a little bit of the credit, the way we start the comment with although. So that acknowledges to this applicant, we've read what they've told us, but there are consequences of the fact that it's not fully deployed yet. So the back half of that sentence is talking about we may not have all of our leaders participating, so we may be missing parts of the organization. And subsequently, they may be dragging behind. We may not be realizing the full impact of value add of the process that we're putting in place. And it may be a consequence of it just starting. So it's this current year. We've got plans to deploy it again the following year and so on and so forth. But the fact remains that it's not fully deployed.
Thanks, Gary. Let's take a look now at a couple comments and ways that they might be improved. Pause the session and take a minute to identify some ways that this comment might be improved. Here are some possible improvements based on adding language from your three key sources. There is an effective systematic approach. There's our scoring guidelines language. To plan for a future of sustainable performance, there's our criteria language. Through the annual SDDM with SWOT analysis for internal, etc. There's our application language. Gary, anything to add to this one?
No, I would reinforce that the model in the second slide, that we're trying to be consistent about that format. The previous slide has content there, but the second slide is adding value on the part of the examiner in interpreting it. It's a subtle thing, but when you're in the shoes of the applicant reading this again, and you begin to see that common template, you'll get better value out of the feedback report. The first slide tends to be closer to just parroting back to the organization what they're doing. It's subtle, but very important.
Let's take a look now at one more process comment. This comment relates to organizational profile linkages. The strategic objectives do not address future core competencies or the strategic challenges identified in the organizational profile. What are some possible improvements to this feedback comment? Here are some possible improvements. The strategic objectives do not address, we'll delete future, it doesn't make sense. The future objectives do not address core competencies of engagement of high quality staff or the strategic challenges of emerging customer expectations of higher quality amenities identified in the organizational profile. While the comment continues to focus on linkage, the specificity of where linkages are missing becomes much more clear. Through this change, the comment becomes much more actionable. What do you think, Gary?
Reinforce again here, Tim, the point. The first version of the comment, the applicant might say to themselves, I don't agree with that statement. It's very generic. I just don't agree with it. The second one provides that additional detail now where the applicant needs to think about this core competency of engagement of high-quality staff or the strategic challenge of emerging customer expectations. So the extent to which we could tie it back to what they're saying to us in other parts of this application. Strategic challenges being an example. They're profiled in the organization profile. Get that rooted in your thought processes as you're going through the evaluation, because strategic challenges are really those big bridge outs, those things that the organization has to deal with in order to get to the desired future level. So the specificity point that Tim is pointing out is very important here as a value add to this comment.
Thanks, Gary. Let's switch gears a little now and focus on improving some results comments. We'll continue to draw language from our three key language sources, but our scoring guidelines source will shift to the results scoring guidelines using the components of LETC, levels, trends, comparisons, and integration. On this slide we have a results chart. Pause the session and draft a possible strength comment or maybe just an observation for this result. Here's a strength comment for this results chart. We immediately see our language sources. Good performance levels against a national comparison and beneficial trends. There's our LETC scoring language. Over 4 years, 2007-2010, are reported for RN turnover. There's some application language. A key performance measure for the workforce segment central to the organization's capability. There's our criteria language. To deliver its core competency, subacute nursing, more application language. Any insights for us here, Gary?
Well, this is a subtle insight, Tim. Good performance level certainly is criteria scoring language, as Tim has indicated. Sometimes it's helpful for the applicant if we be a little more specific about how we're interpreting good to be. And in this example, if we look at the 2010 data point on the example 1 results slide, 20% we're running at versus 65% that is the AHCA study, one might say the latest data point of 2010 showing 3.5 times better than the reference benchmark. So it's a subtle thing, but sometimes it's helpful for us to determine or to say how we're determining what good is or what excellence is, which are the scoring languages.
Thanks, Gary. Let's look at another results chart, this one having to do with employee retention. Take a minute to familiarize yourself with what is being reported here. Here is an OFI comment for this result. Although 8 points of data are trended over 4 years, it is not clear how the trends are beneficial, what levels are good in comparison with other relevant sources, nor how the data describes important workforce segments and capacity. Gary, your thoughts on this comment?
Well, this one here, again, is a subtle kind of thing, Tim. Here we're looking at two key indicators, turnover and retention, and certainly as the comment points out, we don't have any comparisons there. We just don't know how good these trends are. In the mind of the applicant, how are they interpreting that? That would be of use for us for them to display. The second part of the comment talks to this comment about segmentation, important workforce segmentation and capacity. When we see organizations move up the maturity level, it's going to become more important for them to stratify certain key metrics in the results areas. They may be very good in some pieces of the workforce and very poor in the others. But if they're not segmenting that data, that may be a blind spot for them. But again, this is a maturity level aspect. It depends on where our applicant is in its quality journey.
All right, let's move along to a results comment and some suggested improvements. Here's a strength comment from Category 7, Results. State survey results are provided with comparative data over time. First of all, Gary, I noticed that there doesn't seem to be much here in the way of new insight being provided for the applicant. They are well aware of the survey results that they provided. I don't see much here that is going to turn on a light bulb in the mind of the applicant. Do you, Gary?
Not at all. There's really no value add in that statement for the applicant.
So how might this comment be improved? Take a minute to consider that. Here's a suggested improvement. Annual state survey results trended positively from 10 to 2 deficiencies from 2005 to 2010. The organization has had favorable performance compared to the state average since 2006. This result is an example where it is difficult to provide additional information per se. In this improved example, we see that we've tapped some scoring guidelines language. We also see a linkage to some comparative data, the state average in this case. Anything that you'd add to that, Gary?
What I would add here, Tim, is the last part of the results acronym, integration. Let's see, the I is the integration here. A possible enhancement furthermore to this comment might be if we observe why this is important to the organization. They may have said something back in the org profile. They may have said something in strategic challenges or strategic advantages or something in their strategic plan content in Category 2. If we note that this is reinforcing something that's important to them, that could be an add to further add value to this comment.
In summary, start with a positive. Condense your key strengths. Give applicants as much credit as you can. Give the OFIs in a neutral tone. Condense your OFIs. Don't overwhelm applicants. Be focused with your comments. Build on strengths. Let your language assume future success. What would you add to that list, Gary?
Tim, the only thing I would add here is that we as examiners and all this wonderful volunteer spirit that is brought to bear on this, we just want to feel good about delivering the best possible product to the applicant that would continue to encourage them and move them forward. Ultimately, often the examiners have one of the best profiles or understandings of how the organization runs because they're looking at it, first of all, objectively, and secondly, really across the horizontal dimension of the organization, which can add real value to this deliverable. So my encouragement and my applause.
Thanks, Gary, for your help and expertise. This concludes the Examiner Training Series session on feedback writing. Your next session will provide SharePoint user training. Thank you, and good day.